you know, oh, this is just a bad dream.
Gary was laid to rest on September the 3rd, 2007, 3 weeks after his death. It was a traumatic moment for the whole family. Adam Swellings finally admitted to police that he had struck Gary, and forensic evidence was building to place Stephen Sorton at the scene.
We then were able to identify that it was a telephone call from Swellings through to the rest of his colleagues, if you like, to say he was out of prison and they were going to join up. They then, round about 3 p.m, we had them on CCTV buying alcoholic drinks. They were then playing football in a local park when they were approached by a police community sports officer who confiscated some drink off some of the youths. And then round about 7 p.m. onwards, we had a number of incidents that they were involved in where attacks took place, or threats to attacks took place on other individuals and youths in the area, which culminated round about 10:30 with them being in Station Road, and obviously the incident with Mr. Newlove's car before the attack on him.
That night, the gang had been drinking cheap alcohol bought from local off-licences, something that resonated with the general public as it came at a time when fear over Britain's booze culture and associated antisocial behaviour was at its height.
Alcohol played a huge role in what happened to Gary. These boys had been drinking very heavily that night, and this is something that resonated heavily with the public. How could this be allowed to happen? How could these boys have access to alcohol? How could they be allowed to roam the streets looking for trouble while drunk and drinking? It was an issue that the then Chief Constable, Peter Fahey, was aware of.
So you would like to see the drinking age raised to 21?
Yes, absolutely. And it is this issue also about drinking in public. It was certainly based on not just the Gary Newlove case, but the fact that it was such a huge issue for us right across Cheshire. And it was that feeling that something needed to be done. And, you know, the particular danger that young people were causing, those that had been drinking that much, but also the fact that they made themselves very, very vulnerable, either as victims of crime or as perpetrators of crime.
On the 13th of November, just 3 months after Gary's death, the trial began. 5 youths were up on murder charges, including Adam Swellings, 19, Stephen Sorton, 17, and Jordan Cunliffe, aged 16.
They started hitting my dad and...
After several police interviews and identity parades came the trauma of a trial. The Newlove girls and Helen were all to be key witnesses for the prosecution. Amy and Danielle, being the youngest, gave their evidence by video link.
I had to sit with my hands underneath my lap, and if I cried I have to put my head down. And it was just so confusing because the questions were so highly worded because I was only 12 and I didn't really understand what they were saying. And I'm not the cleverest of people, but they fired questions after questions and it just confused me. And I was saying no when I was going to say yes, and I was so uncomfortable and it put me under so much pressure.
I didn't know what it was going to be like, I didn't know what to expect. And to be cross-examined by 5 different people and you feel like you're the one in the wrong. That's how I felt. When I got there, I thought I'd done something wrong, and, you know, if I say something that, you know, isn't spot on, if I've got, like, a description of one of the guys wrong, you know, I'm going to ruin everything and they're not going to, you know, they're not going to be put away. I felt like I could, in one word, let someone down, and then that would be on my conscience. And I already felt guilty for, you know, not saving my dad, and I still do, and I know I can't have done anything.
What was it like seeing those youths in court?
They were just normal, everyday youths you see on the street. But basically, the distance between where I sat and they sat is literally the distance that me and you are at the moment. And to actually see them look around smiling, it's unbelievable. You just think, how can you do that?
Is that what they were doing?
Yeah, they laughed, they were smiling. It made me feel physically sick, to be honest, and we are told we can't show any emotion whatsoever, so it was a hard 10 weeks to follow.
They showed no remorse during the court process. I think at times difficulty was, I think they treated it more as a bit of a joke, in fairness. within the trial process, not taking it seriously. At times they were sniggering, and I think even occasions they were dropping off to sleep as evidence was being given.
He went out to see what was happening.
I think it was very difficult. I think when they gave their evidence, particularly the children, it was heart-rending to be sat in that court building to hear some of the evidence. And I think from a policing perspective, when you hear the evidence, you always think the benefit of hindsight is the more we could have done on that night or previous.
After 10 long, painful weeks for Helen and the girls, the jury were sent out to consider the evidence. But it would be 10 agonising days before they returned their verdict.
You have been found guilty.
Of the 5 charged, 3 teenagers were found guilty of Gary's murder. The other 2 were acquitted. Cunliffe, Swellings and Saughton were sentenced to life with minimum terms of 12, 17 and 15 years respectively. Saughton's tariff was later reduced to 13 years on appeal.
Guilty of murder. 3 teenagers who attacked Gary Newlove outside his home in Cheshire have been convicted of murder.
There must have been relief that the people who did this were going to prison for quite a long time.
There was relief. We got 3 guilty verdicts. But the really, murder is mandatory life sentence. So you hear that and you want life for life. As not as a revenge, as justice that we should have in place in this country.
They've taken my dad's life and they've taken away what my life would have been. They've taken away what mum's life would have been, my sisters, my dad's brother, everyone in our family and everyone around us. We've had to change the way we are because they thought it was a bit of fun kicking someone and causing them to die.
And what is it like for you personally and for your daughters, you as a family, to live with the loss that you've suffered?
We have good days, we have bad days. I just now think on the Friday I woke up a wife. On the Friday night I went to bed as a widow. And you don't ever think that is going to happen to you. I just want my daughters to be how Gary would have wanted them to be. To be Zoe, to be Amy, to be Danielle, and to get through each pinnacle moment, on their 18th, the 21st, when they get married, that I can stay there and actually think that Gary will be proud of what I'm doing.
Next, a family's brave struggle to come to terms with their enormous loss.
It's not about Gary being a murder victim. It's about doing something good out of something horrendous. It keeps Gary alive in a sense, but it actually raises awareness.
The light has gone out of our lives. It's like a piece of our jigsaw has been lost forever. Amy suffers terrible flashbacks of that night, as Zoe and Danielle also do. As regards myself, I am completely broken-hearted.
The murder of Gary Newlove provoked public debate and outrage about antisocial behaviour.
If we all get together and we stand together, it's more impactful and we may get something done.
In the weeks, months and years that have followed the brutal murder, Helen and the girls have become more and more determined for some good to come from Gary's death.
There is no quick fix to Britain's problems. We need a real strategy.
It's not about Gary being a murder victim. It's about doing something good out of something horrendous. It keeps Gary alive in a sense, but it actually raises awareness and it makes everybody sit up again and say, because complacency doesn't sit with me at all, and that's what you can become.
Today, Helen is in London for a series of meetings.
Morning.
Good morning. They are aimed at discussing how the drinks industry can help to combat binge drinking.
Yeah, they're going to be the community pubs, which I'm really, that's the most important one, to get into local hubs. So that, because the mechanism that we have in place there, that's where the antisocial behaviour is.
Helen is fighting on a number of fronts to tackle antisocial behaviour associated with drinking, to strive for better victim support, to force better parental responsibility. Her work has triggered national debate. Her hope that another family will not have to bear the anguish hers has suffered.
What do you make of what your mother's trying to do and trying to change things?
It's horrible that it's got to be my mum that's got to make people sit up and listen. And it's only just now